and then she gets handed the microphone. She goes, "Thank you," and then she says the N-word right on the microphone in front of 400 people, at the preview screening of Django Unchained. Two showbiz reporters discuss the past, present, and future of Quentin Tarantino's work. It's a new Total Hollywood, with me, Sandro Monetti in Los Angeles.
And me, a new co-host, Amy Rapeer, based the opposite side of the pond in the UK.
Welcome aboard, Amy. So, what do you think of the undisputed genius that is Quentin Tarantino?
You know what, I'm actually going to come in hot with this one and say that I sort of think he's a bit overrated.
Thank you and good night. Well, hang on, that's an interesting start. Why?
Oh, see, I think it's probably best if I ask you first why you rate him so highly, and then I can come and dispel all of that later.
Best and most unique filmmaker of his generation, because he's literally thrown away the book on script writing. There was a book that came out about 25 years ago called Save the Cat, a guide to screenwriting that every aspiring writer seems to have written. For me, it's the reason why there's been so many bad movies for the last 2 decades, because everyone seems to be following the same template, to the point where you can almost see the numbers of pages on the screen. 10 minutes in, let's establish the quest. Page 20, let the hero learn something about themselves. But Tarantino has a unique structure and a unique rhythm to his work, and so that's what makes his films always something to look forward to, because they're different from everybody else's, and different in a good way, I would say.
I would definitely agree to a certain extent. He does throw out, I guess, what you would call the traditional, the very samey style you'll see in a lot of other things. But at a certain point, I do also think that when you come to expect the unexpected with him, he almost has his own format that you can then expect specifically from him, even if it's unique from everyone else. And I think one of the criticisms that I bring in at that point, the quality of enjoyment I've had from his films has been so disparate.
Is that because they're too offensive, too violent, too boring, too many foot fetish scenes? What is it specifically that ruins your entertainment so much when QT's name is above the title?
You know what? It's a little bit of all of those, actually, depending on what film. But the foot fetish thing, now that is unignorable for me. Every time you see his signature feet come into frame, I want to scream.
Well, Reservoir Dogs is mercifully free of that, at least the guys kept their shoes on in that one. But we get a hint of it in Pulp Fiction. We really get more of it in Jackie Brown. Lots more of it in Kill Bill, and it hasn't gone away. I mean, if you look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so many lingering shots on Margaret Qualley's feet and Margot Robbie's as well, and Tarantino, hasn't hidden away from this sort of accusation, but I would say certainly none of those feet scenes add anything to the plot. Even in Pulp Fiction, when John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are discussing a foot massage, it seems to slow down the movie a bit. So Tarantino needs to get over the feet thing and step up the violence. Is that what you're saying?
Sort of. I sort of wish he would. And even though I know it's a fetish thing that these feet to some people are very sexy, when Qualley puts her feet up on the dash in that scene, I have never been so turned off in my life. That was a lot to take in as a cinema goer.
Yeah, I mean, that movie was so long, and you're thinking, and Tarantino's like, where am I going to cut it? Well, you could maybe start with all the lingering shots of Margaret Qualley's feet in that movie. Might have been somewhere to start. But to me, it's almost become a signature of Tarantino movies, because when I watch the old Hitchcock films, I always look for the cameo by Alfred Hitchcock. He liked to put himself in his own movies in the backs of scenes. Usually gets it away with quite early in the movie. But now with Tarantino, you almost expect it and say, okay, when are the shoes going to come off and when are we going to see the feet? It's part of the poetry, rhythm and magic, I would say, of a Quentin film.
Oh, I'd say there's no magic about that, because I totally get where you're coming from with Hitchcock, and to me there was a certain magic about that, especially when you'd sort of catch in the background his silhouette. That does seem very artful to me, quite poetic. There is nothing poetic about writing a scene for yourself to drink alcohol off Salma Hayek's feet. There's nothing about that screams artistry. And so I can't quite accredit the same kind of thing to Tarantino.
Yeah, that was in the vampire movie From Dusk Till Dawn, wasn't it? That he acted in as well.
Yes.
And let's look at other sort of controversies that we touched on there. Now, what about his use of language? I mean, when Jackie Brown came out and featured 38 uses of the N-word, Spike Lee complained. And what do you think of his use of is it his tribute to the blaxploitation movies he watched growing up, or is there something else going on there?
You know what, that is something that bothers me, and I know a lot of people would say, oh, you've got to be a snowflake, or say that, and maybe they're right, but there is something that is slightly off-putting about him being so confident using the word so much in his scripts. Especially, I didn't know that Spike Lee had sort of brought this up in the past, but I feel like you should probably pay attention to that when a really prominent black director draws to attention the fact that what you're doing might actually be quite offensive to people from the black community. And the one that always sticks out to me was Django, because I remember getting to the end of that film, first watched it as a teenager and thinking, is that not just a bit weird that he was throwing around the N-word so willy-nilly? Considering, obviously, that he's the writer, he chooses when to use this, he chooses how frequently. And I know there is a lot of people that think he sort of doesn't have the right to do that.
Well, I'm lucky enough to moderate Q&As here in Hollywood with a bunch of movie stars, and I remember hosting a preview screening of Django Unchained, and it was me on stage interviewing Samuel L. Jackson, one of Tarantino's favourite actors, of course, in front of an audience of industry voters. And when we went to the audience questions, this lady at the front, had her hand up. She had both hands up, actually. She was so determined to get the first question. So I went to her and said, yes, a question in the front row for Mr. Jackson. And she goes, why did you have to use that word so much? And Samuel L. Jackson replies, which word do you mean? And she says, the N-word. And I'm sinking in my seat, so is the rest of the audience, but interested to see how Samuel L. Jackson responds to it. He goes, the N-word, nincompoop? No! Neverland? No! And all of us in the theatre are thinking, don't say it, don't say it. And she finally grabs the microphone, which was, you've been to Q&As, you've seen that the microphone gets handed to audience questions. And so people at the back even hadn't heard what she was saying. And then she gets handed the microphone. She goes, thank you. And then she says the N-word right on the microphone in front of 400 people, at the preview screening of Django Unchained, to which Samuel L. Jackson replies, do you feel better now you've called me that? And so that's how he shut down that argument. So I mean, that is definitely a source of debate, and something that it's a word that Tarantino has thrown around sort of willy-nilly. If you've read his book Cinema Speculation, which is the closest we've had to an autobiography so far from Tarantino, he tells his the formative years of him as a moviegoer was when his mother's African-American boyfriends would take him to see blaxploitation films when he was a very sort of tender age, where this word was thrown about, and so it became part of his film lexicon. That's part of his language. But that's a great point. The other controversy about Tarantino is that he's something of a thief. Stealing, scenes from everything from Hong Kong action pics to other movies as well. I guess you'd say it was a homage. How do you feel about that aspect of his work?
That is such a difficult part of making any form of what can be considered art, because where do you draw the line between paying homage and just nicking things, especially when it comes to things that you may have taken from other cultures? Like you say, taking things from your blaxploitation movies, from movies that focus on martial arts and such, that obviously then went into informing lots of Kill Bill. It's a bit of a modern buzzword these days, but the cultural appropriation idea of is it appreciation? Is he bringing something in from a culture that he adores, from a genre of movies that he knows and respects? Or is he sort of stealing it without that much respect or credit and reusing it for himself? And honestly, I'm not really sure if I have an answer to that one, because as a director and as a lover of film, it is really clear that he deeply, deeply appreciates a whole wide range of genres. It's just the question of that I don't know if I can answer that. Does he always use this knowledge in the most respectful and constructive way?
You know, something I've started to have a problem with some of his recent movies is his rewriting of history. Because if we look at Inglourious Basterds, which ends with that amazing scene of the Jewish American soldiers gunning down cutting down Adolf Hitler in a movie theatre. You know, that was a great piece of entertainment. But people do tend to believe things that they see on screen, and I have actually overheard American kids in the park having a discussion about Hitler, and one saying to the other, "Of course he was." He was gunned down in a movie theatre, and so of course, and so the fact that someone would actually believe that has probably been magnified all over the world. And then when I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we all know what a horrible fate befell Sharon Tate. But he manages to give it a kind of happy ending and sort of change things there as well. So. I guess a filmmaker to a certain extent. He's not making documentaries, but how do you feel about him taking real life events and changing them so much for entertainment value?
You know, that does crack me up, that there's people who have watched Inglourious Basterds and thought that was the truth, but I'm not sure if that's more his fault or the American education system, maybe the combination of the two. But that is a really interesting thing about what he does, is this sort of this retroactive sense of justice that he rewrites the events to. Like well, I can't say we all, but I know I love the idea of a whole cinema full of Nazis getting done in this massive ball of fire, serving some kind of justice for the atrocities that the people had to face and such. And then again, with Sharon Tate, she was taken too soon, absolutely horrible, violent death. But is he really fixing anything by instead having one of the cult members sort of blazed alive with the flamethrower? Or is he capitalising off of what was a tragic young woman's death? With Inglourious Basterds, I've seen people make the argument, again, that he's instead capitalising off of a horrible experience, off of a struggle of a group of people in a tumultuous time in history, to say the least. And what actual good is he doing by rewriting things? As you say, people can sometimes see this, and even if it might be their own fault for not researching, believe that it's true. And aside from that, other than being entertaining, what's it really adding?
So even though we have some division about his quality and even value as a filmmaker, I think there's no dispute of my earlier statement that at least Tarantino's films always have something interesting in them or to look out for, whether it's revisionist history or a well-turned ankle. There's always something to discuss. Something for everybody, I suppose. From Nazis to feet to racism, there's always fodder for discussion that Quentin Tarantino has given the industry. Now, he is very concerned and aware of his legacy, of course. Now, there are 9 official in canon Tarantino directed movies, and he's said that his upcoming 10th will be his last. He'd always said that he was going to retire from directing movies at 60, and had said that sort of number 10 would be the one. So there's been lots of speculation ever since the 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, came out, basically, would he stick to his promise? Which he qualified a bit by saying, look, I'm not retiring from directing. I'm going to go into television, miniseries, other forms of storytelling. But, you know, this my 10th film will be the last. And so the 10th film, which starts filming later in 2023, is to be called The Movie Critic. Now, he has given no plot details yet, but speculation has centred around the fact that it may well feature on Pauline Kael, the doyen of movie critics and a rare female movie critic in the 1970s. Now, I imagine every actress in the world would sort of push their granny under the bus for a chance to get that part, right?
Surely, because that's not only is it a great part in that we can see that he has his favourites. Quentin Tarantino picks his favourites when it comes to actors and actresses, and he's been, I would say, career making, not to take away credit from the actual performers themselves, but he's given a booster to a lot of performers that have gone on to give career defining performances and such with him.
And career reviving, I'd say, with people like Jackie Brown. He had Pam Grier in it. He had Robert Forster in it, and but let's not forget John Travolta in Pulp Fiction as well. And he does have this repertory company of actors. So, is he going to pick from within it, you know, and maybe go with Uma Thurman and Margot Robbie, or is Cate Blanchett, you know, who must be eyeing Best Actress Oscar number 3, going to come into the Tarantino world and play the part? Who are you thinking?
You know, my best guess would be that he would go through his old repertoire, because, I mean, if that was me and this was going to be my big finale, my final film, I would sort of want to almost, it sounds really pretentious, but pay homage to myself in a way. And I think it's almost what a lot of audience members will expect as well, because we are so used to it now. And if this is going to be the big finale, the epitome, the rounding off of everything Tarantino, I'd almost be a bit disappointed if we didn't get back some of the famous faces.
So let's talk about sort of rounding off Tarantino. Let's look back now on his films. Something of a scorecard, if you like. And it all started back in the early 90s with Reservoir Dogs, a movie which just came out of nowhere, about a bunch of criminals pulling off a heist. It's still hugely popular. I saw it in a midnight screening just weeks ago. Packing the place, everybody cheering, incredible dialogue. It was an amazing calling card by a new filmmaker who seemed to have come from working in a video store to suddenly, winning at Sundance, a film festival. It's exciting, isn't it, when a new filmmaker just really, puts their stamp on the industry like that?
Oh, it is, and what an introduction. You know, as much as I say that he's overrated, and I do stand by that, but this is definitely one of his better, in my opinion, one of his better offerings. And it does make me think, when you obviously mentioned his dialogue, part of what he's so famous for is his dialogue. He runs loops around other writers out there in lots of ways, but this might be a bit, but you'll bring it in when it doesn't need to be said. I did see earlier today an old Time article when I was having a bit of a research beforehand, that as of the release of his last film, of all the dialogue in all of his films, only something like 25% of it is said by female actors. And obviously I would say it's not quite applicable when talking about Reservoir Dogs directly, because pretty much the whole cast is male, so obviously there's not really going to be any women speaking that. But it just makes me think of that. He started off with having a very heavily male cast, and it's something he kind of continued with. So even though the film, I do believe, is a strong film, and the dialogue sort of set the tone for what was going to come from him, instantly I'm put off in certain areas.
Well, 2 points there. First of all, if indeed his last film, The Movie Critic, is focusing on Pauline, the female movie critic, then hopefully he's learned that lesson, because he's gone from an all-male first movie to a female-focused last one. And on the dialogue, yes, to me it's still never been better than it was in Reservoir Dogs. Michael Madsen's lines, "Are you going to bark all day, little doggy, or are you going to bite?" Harvey Keitel, who read this script and put the money up for it himself because he so wanted such a great part, giving lines like, "You shoot me in a dream, you'd better wake up and apologise." I mean, actors just love dialogue like this. He went from that to Pulp Fiction, and won at the Cannes Film Festival, and as we mentioned before, brought back Travolta. Now, that was made in '94, but even today, it still occupies a huge place in pop culture, doesn't it?
Yes, and this is where I'm going to say something that I think is very controversial.
Ooh.
That film, to me, I don't want to say all style and no substance, but because it's a very, very stylistic film, and so much of the visual element of it has been replicated, has been praised, has been sort of paid homage to, is adored by so many people. People who've not even seen the film would recognise the silhouettes of John Travolta and Uma Thurman dancing.
Dancing the Batusi, by the way, a dance ripped off from the Adam West Batman TV series in 1966. Yes, that's the Batusi. Yes, another pop culture reference, yes. That is not really a controversial criticism, because I would love it if somebody called me all style and no substance. No, to me, that would be a compliment. So.
I know so many people are such staunch defenders of this film that I have had conversations before where I've said, oh, maybe the plot's a little less memorable. Maybe the characters, I was a little less invested in them. And it had been met with absolute horror. But to me, it was just absolutely not one of his most memorable films for anything other than the way it looked.
Well, I mean, I look forward to future episodes, because I would think, well, if you don't like that, what do you like in film? Clearly, very if you're going to talk about French art movies and Mike Leigh films, this friendship is not going to get off to a very good start. But keep listening to Total Hollywood, and then you'll find out what Amy does actually enjoy. What about Jackie Brown? Did you enjoy that one?
I did enjoy Jackie Brown. I think I made the mistake the first time I watched it by trying to multitask and do something at the same time, and found very quickly that I could not follow what the hell was going on.
Was this in the cinema or watching it at home?
No, I was watching it at home. I got it up on Netflix. I had that on. This would have been when I was in uni. I was probably doing some uni work, and it got sort of halfway through the movie. I looked up and I was like, I have no idea who this person is in relation to this person, why there's two bags, why she's yelling at someone in the canteen of a mall when... I had no idea, and I had to start it all over again. And when I did pay attention, it became much easier to follow. But I wouldn't say it was the one of his films that I would say is my favourite, whereas quite a few of my friends do tout that as their favourite and one of their top Tarantino movies.
It's not one of mine. I compare it to the difficult third album for a rock band or pop star, because you come straight out of the gate with your debut album, stuff you've been working on your whole life. It's all sort of authentic, and it's the product of your environment. And then you get the follow-up. You can put your second idea into action, and then suddenly, okay, where's the third one? And then so it was, didn't match up to the first two for my mind, but still very entertaining. And then Kill Bill 1 and 2, his samurai tribute. What do you think?
It's like he thought of every genre he could that maybe people weren't expecting and then smushed them all into one. And I will admit, there's some very impressive fight scenes, and there's a lot of very aesthetically pleasing, the cinematography, etc. But one thing that does put me off of that is that we have, obviously, Uma Thurman at the centre, being this girl boss, going around with her incredible sword. And so it sort of can be praised as a very woman-positive movie, very led by female. And then you look at the reality of how she was treated on set, and that really turned me off. I had a similar experience when I found out about how they treated Shelley Duvall in The Shining, and that completely recoloured the way I approached that film. Uma Thurman did not have a good time with this film, so I can't give it quite the amount of credit I otherwise would try to.
No, you make an excellent point, and time is the lens through which we watch a lot of these classics and watch them in a different way. And those of us who are sort of showbiz reporters, are very sort of close on this stuff, and so it's just heartbreaking what happened there, and. We won't go into it now, but you can read all about it. But, I have a similar problem with The Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock film, an otherwise sort of great film, but you realise how terrified Tippi Hedren was through the whole thing and sort of cruelly treated. It's almost fetishistic to watch it at this point. So, I don't disagree. And talking of controversy, let's go on to Inglourious Basterds next, which, featured some glorious performances. This was the movie calling card of Michael Fassbender in a supporting role. He's someone who got his break in a stage production of Reservoir Dogs, and then obviously came to Tarantino's attention. But the movie is totally stolen by Christoph Waltz, as one of the most delicious bad guys in movie history. And as much as we've criticised Tarantino a lot in this episode, let's praise him as well, because what he did there was give the mass movie world an introduction to one of the greatest previously undiscovered on a big scale talents I would say of our lifetime.
Oh, his performance in that is genuinely stunning. He's absolutely captivating from the first moment he comes on screen. I have to say that opening scene is probably one of the very first that would come to my mind if someone was to ask me what were the most sort of impactful, memorable opening scenes or just scenes in general in my recent memory. His performance is consistently deeply affecting. He makes my skin crawl, but in a way that makes me really appreciate just what a bloody good job he was doing.
Yes, absolutely. And so, that is a movie which has its controversies. We've already talked about the ending, but you can't deny the performance there. And Christoph Waltz went on to win a second Oscar for his second Tarantino movie in Django Unchained, where this time, and DiCaprio's there. I don't think there was any bit of scenery left unbitten in that movie from DiCaprio. But again, Christoph Waltz, manages to rein it in at least slightly more so there, and comes through again. Jamie Foxx in it as well. Where do you think Django Unchained, sits in movie history, if anywhere?
You know what? I do genuinely really enjoy the film, and it's only in the past few years that I started to sort of look at it more critically. In general, I do believe it is a very, very well-made film. I feel it's well-paced. The performances from all of the central cast, I think, are fantastic. Jamie Foxx, Leo DiCaprio, obviously Christoph Waltz, Samuel L. Jackson, once again, fantastic in it. And I was reading an interview where Quentin Tarantino was speaking on sort of where he thinks the Western genre interacts with this, and whether he thought that his characterization of the relationship between Django and the dentist was sort of serving into unhelpful stereotypes. And his argument was no, because he's not trying to draw any kind of racial message there. He was bringing a Western and trying to make it overlap with a different kind of a part of history, and he's going for more an apprentice narrative. So when I start to look at things critically, it really depends on sort of which side of that I choose to believe, whether I think that he did think this fully through and he's really just going for Western archetypes, or whether the critics of him are more correct in saying that actually making a film like this probably could have been done a little bit more tastefully and maybe with more input from people who have more skin in the game, I guess.
Agreed. Now, even geniuses are allowed one mistake. The Hateful Eight. Discuss.
I'm going to be completely truthful with you. The first time I tried to watch it, I watched it on a plane, actually, of all things.
Oh, okay.
And for context, I can't sleep on planes. I'm terrified of flying. I fell asleep.
Oh, there you go. There's a recommendation. If you can't sleep on planes, just put Hateful Eight on your iPad. You'll be out in 20 minutes. No. Now, we have a similar experience here, because I was at the premiere. and it was so, I mean, a word you do not associate with Tarantino films is boring. But I think into the 7th hour of it, no, it wasn't that long. But at one point in the movie, I'm slumping down in my seat. My eyes are closing, and I was kind of excited about sort of, well, Western mystery. There you go. There's a good sort of a combination. I like the cast. Especially thrilled to have Tim Roth back, an actor I've always enjoyed, and I was so excited to see it, but I was almost asleep halfway through it, so it's just as well that he bounced back with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a real love letter to Tinseltown's past, present, and future. Are you going to bag on that one as well, or do you think that's got merit?
You're not going to like this.
Oh dear,
I think
here we go.
The strongest, the strongest part of that film is easily the production design. You say, obviously, it's a love letter to old Tinseltown. I completely agree. Genuinely stunning. All the art direction, the setting, the costumes, everything. And the characterizations all worked really well for me. And I did sort of feel like I had been transported to that time. I felt very in the moment. I unfortunately also felt like I'd been left in that moment for about 24 hours straight, and I'd actually quite like to leave. And the movie just kept going. And I did not feel that the payoff justified the length of time I had to sit in that cinema.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has actually inspired a cinema. My favourite place in the world to see films is the New Beverly, which is an old revival cinema, an old flea pit that when it was going to be closed down a few years ago and turned into a laundrette, Quentin Tarantino bought it. And he decided to not only pay for it, but occasionally program it as well. And so you get a lot of midnight screenings there of Tarantino's films. Once a month, one will play, and then they tend to switch in and out. But for the rest of the time, it's all movies that Tarantino loves, or he thinks you will enjoy. There's always something to see there, but the interior of the cinema is decorated with fake movie posters for films which supposedly starred Rick Dalton, which was Leonardo DiCaprio's character from that movie. And so
That's
every
fantastic.
time you go out for popcorn and it's all there, and you see all these posters. And when you see a film there, whether it's from 1977, 1989, the trailers come for films from that particular year as well. It's a great experience. And so Tarantino's love of film, which was shown in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, extends to this cinema, the New Beverly. And when the movie critic comes out, that's where I'm going to see it, because I think Tarantino has given me so much enjoyment in my film-going life, and I want to sort of round it out, in the perfect place to see it. So that's where I'll be. You'll obviously watch it on a plane, multitasking. Good luck getting through it. But that's what these shows are about. I mean, movies, they're why we love them so much. They really divide opinion, and clearly we're split on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But when we were preparing for this show, we were also discussing there were many movies that Tarantino had written but not directed. Natural Born Killers, From Dusk Till Dawn. He contributed dialogue to, like a Crimson Tide, for example, and several others that he was a script doctor on. But for my money, the best Tarantino movie is one that he didn't direct, but just wrote, and that was True Romance with Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette. It's celebrating its 30th anniversary of this year, and you told me the other day you'd never seen it. So I said, well, here we go. Let's end the show with that, and maybe by watching that you can totally change your opinion about Quentin Tarantino, and thought that at least once he did display true genius. It's a crime thriller with a great cast. Amy, I'm desperate to hear, what did you think of True Romance?
You know what? I am a sucker for a crime thriller in the right situation, and I can say that I did thoroughly enjoy True Romance.
Hooray! Hallelujah! Why?
I wasn't sure where it was going at the start, because I didn't want to read up on it beforehand. I'm not one of those people that wants to know everything going into watching something. I want to experience it as it comes. And so obviously when we start with this very rom-com angle, and this kind of weird twinkly music that they keep bringing in and out, I was thinking, where is he going with this? When and how is this going to turn into a Tarantino movie? And then obviously when the moment comes and he visits Drexel's place, it happened very quickly, and I was like, oh, we're there now.
Gary Oldman playing the Rastafarian villain, Drexel. Yes, typecasting again.
Gary, unforgettable, I'll say that much. That is something I'm never going to be able to wipe from my mind, is the visage of Gary Oldman dressed up for that role.
That's casting you wouldn't get in 2023, is it? Gary Oldman as a Rastafarian criminal.
I think it's probably for a good reason. But no, I thought that the characters were really interesting. It was kooky, it was weird, but it was all intentionally that way. And I found it very charming for that reason. I found the couple of them genuinely very charming. I really, really love Patricia Arquette. I thought that was a really fantastic performance from her. So overall, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the wild ride that it brought me, and the fact that, having sort of seen the end of it now, I never ever could have estimated that that was the direction it was going when I turned it on.
Great. Well, that's Tarantino in a nutshell, I suppose, and helped by the brilliant director Tony Scott, which makes you wonder, are Tarantino scripts better in the hands of other directors, maybe, Did you miss the foot fetishism in that? There wasn't so much of that in this one. So, but you're right about Patricia Arquette. I mean, she steals that movie, and for some very accomplished actors, there's some great performances in it. It's James Gandolfini, who was cast as Tony Soprano on the back of this, is in there as well. And there's a For the Ages scene between Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper. And I was lucky enough to interview Dennis Hopper towards the end of his life when we were reflecting on his career. And he said, "I'm not an actor, I'm an alchemist, because with the scripts I'm given for most of my life, I've had to turn dirt into gold. But when I got Quentin Tarantino's script for True Romance, it was like being handed gold, and that was so refreshing and such a nice change." But of course, Amy, Total Hollywood is audio gold. So how did you feel about your first show?
I feel good. I feel like I probably said some quite controversial things that people might not like. But, sometimes you've got to play the devil's advocate when you've got someone as big as Quentin Tarantino. I think his reputation can take it.
Join us next time for more controversy with me, nice guy Sandro, and her totally outspoken movie director hater, Amy. Too much?
No, that'll bring him back for sure.
Absolutely. See you next time on Total Hollywood.